Let's get rolling. My name is Eric Burgett. Welcome, everybody. Even as you're filing in, welcome from all over the US and all over the world, apparently. We've got people coming in to this digital version of a expo. So we'll do our best here this year, right? That's kind of the name of the game this year. My name, like I said, is Eric Burgett. I'm coming to you from a basement in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So greetings from Minnesota. I'm a creative director at a company called Dashe and Thomson. And Dashe and Thomson is based in Minneapolis as well. My role there is creative director and learning experience designer. And today I will be in the role of digital expositor. So welcome everybody. And yeah, let's roll. So what is this session going to be about? Well, my primary goal is to share what we've found to be 5 keys for designing effective microlearning experiences. This is a bit of a show and tell conversation, but I'll try to build this conversation around those foundational components, those 5 keys. So along the way, you'll get a glimpse of recent projects that we've worked on, and just a view into how our philosophy of learning experience design plays itself out. So I don't want to spend too much time on the question of what is microlearning or why microlearning. In other words, I'm not trying to sell you on the idea of microlearning. I think most of us appreciate the value of splitting up our content into little bite-sized chunks. So rather, I'm hoping to walk through what it can look like, and just the how. How do we set the stage for effective microlearning? So let's keep in mind that there are, when it comes to microlearning, it can come in many shapes and styles, right? They're all short and targeted, but they can be videos or they can be highly interactive, clickable experiences. And today I really mainly want to talk about more of the interactive. Think about how to develop effective interactions. So first, let's define a few key terms here, what we're going to talk about. An interaction can mean a few different things. So with e-learning, we get to design visuals that allow the user to click and respond. And so what you're seeing now is what I would call an info-parsing interaction. It is an interaction. There is plenty of clicking, but it's really about separating information into digestible, smaller segments. And info parsing interactions can be important and can be helpful. It's very helpful in making dense information more digestible. And these types of interactions are helpful, no doubt. But it's often not as effective as another type of interaction. And so within this idea of interaction, there's another term that we've recently started to use, which is what we call a consequential interaction. And so a consequential interaction is one that simulates what the real world action would be, and it has a direct impact on the outcome of events. So you're trying to create these experiences or these this interactivity on the screen that isn't just about making like a show and tell of more text. It's not just making text more digestible, but it's about making decisions and like having some kind of consequence to what you're deciding. So another way you might hear this distinction described is action-based content versus info-based content. And so we often try, at Dashe and Thomson, we try to direct our instructional design toward action-based experiences whenever possible, or as much as possible. It doesn't mean that there isn't a place for simpler info-based, like more straightforward info-based microlearning. And I'll show you an example of, like I would say, an info-based microlearning course. But like I said, usually we try to create action-based, consequential learning experiences, particularly in microlearning experiences. Okay, so how do we do that? What's our process for that, or what are some foundational components for that process? So number one, of course, is know your learner. That really, that type of empathy is where we begin. So understand the day-to-day barriers and the keys to success for this person, this learner. Understand that particular role. So for example, is your learner a new hire? And if, let's say that your learner is a new hire, what are the key skills or activities that distinguish someone that you would consider like a newbie? That you say, okay, well, that person's a newbie. That's okay, but that's just who they are. They're in this sort of new category. Well, what distinguishes somebody from being a newbie to being, experienced and competent in that role? Like, what specifically is that barrier? Is it a proficiency in using the software? So is it like really understanding the software where they know all the quick keys and it's just intuitive to them, like where to go and how to get there? Or is it not about the technology at all? It's more of a soft skill. It's more of that intuitive sense of how to make that sale or how to make that decision. What is it in between them being new and them being excelling, or at least competent? So thinking about that, like, what are the true barriers? Like, is it knowledge? Is it motivation? Or is it just practice? This person, they know they need to know this learner, but they just need to practice it. So there we go. Number one, understand your learner. And that will naturally lead to number two, which is define your objective. So literally write it out. Let's write out, this is our objective for this micro learning. And so this writing it out really is to protect against all the many good ideas that tend to just sort of gravitate toward a project or a module. And it happens, like, especially, with micro learning, you really have to have a targeted objective. And so there's all these kind of floating information or learning objectives or things that would be good for a person to know that just sort of float in and around your module. And they just sort of tend to get absorbed into the project you're working on. Maybe I shouldn't say you, maybe just the projects that we're working on. A lot of good ideas float in. So I think you would agree, it's nice to keep it as a singular primary objective. So let me start giving some examples. I think that can help. So we had a course that we were creating with a medical organization, and they wanted to help their doctors or clinicians understand the basics of remote patient monitoring. It was kind of a new technology, some new processes remote patient monitoring is when you've got a device at home and then the doctor or the clinic can kind of keep tabs on their patient without them coming in, right? So it's a new tech, new process. So they wanted to help overcome some of these user adoption barriers. And as we're talking with the subject matter experts, they came with a lot of tangential information, a lot of features and benefits about this monitoring and checking in with patients while they're at home, that type of thing. So, and we did need them to understand some elements of the software and some of the, just setting up FAQs for how to set this thing up. But there were a few key actions or a few key decisions that we realized we needed to target. And one of them was around determining eligibility for this setup, like for this remote patient monitoring setup. So what we did was targeted the microlearning to that point in the process where the doctor or the team needed to decide, is this patient eligible? And so it was a very simple interaction where we just said, here's the background of the patient. Are they eligible or not eligible? And we allowed that informative content to be available if they needed it, but really quickly, put them right in the situation where they need to decide, do you think this person's eligible or not eligible based on their background? So, a fairly straightforward project using Storyline, and help them practice right at that point of need of really solidifying the knowledge there. So once you've defined that objective, this kind of flows out of that. It's really an extension of the objective, and that's defining the actions. So what does the tangible process or activity look like? Again, it's trying to shape the information that your subject matter experts are kind of gathering or sharing with you, and then trying to shape that into an action or a series of actions whenever possible. So here's an example. In this course, we had an audience of accountants, and I think it was a part of a larger certification or a refresh for some. And so the objective here was around defining materiality. And I had no idea what that meant before. I don't know, maybe most do, most don't, I don't know. In the accounting world, that's a key idea is defining materiality and assessing risk. And so, obviously we didn't come to the table with a lot of knowledge about that process, and there's a lot of, math and filling out forms and things like that. So we had to listen and kind of guide the conversation about how to define the actions of like, okay, what does this look like in real life? And so what does it look like when it goes wrong? So what type of mistakes do people make? And that's really when the light bulb starts going on about, okay, here's how we could turn this into an interaction. And so they kind of shared with us that they have a set process with 8 steps or 6 steps or whatever it was. And it was really based on a series of interview questions that they would have with the client. And so what you're seeing right now is as kind of a mock-up of this interview portion of the course. And they'd have an interview with a client. They would ask a series of questions and kind of gather documents, gather information, and then kind of go back to their office and calculate materiality. So what we did was we just simulated that experience. We kind of created these little videos in Vyond, dropped them into Storyline just to kind of let the characters come alive a little bit. And so there's kind of a conversation between the first person learner and then this customer of the accountant. And then they would have to make choices on what to say, kind of what to ask for, or how to guide that conversation. And so they could click on those questions. At any point in the conversation, they could stop and say, all right, I think I've got everything I need, and head back to their office. There was no real incorrect or correct feedback at that point. So when they head back to their office, they've got this form to fill out, and they have their documents with anything that they asked, any document they asked for, they've got in this repository here, and any information they had asked for comes in the notes tab. So they could fill out their form and move through the life. But the catch is, if they just kind of skipped several important questions, they would have to call the client back and ask for that information that they missed. And so the consequences, talking about consequential interactions, the consequences are, it's just a slightly annoyed client. So it doesn't say correct or incorrect, but you might get a response that says, why do you keep calling me back? Or, hey, didn't we get everything we needed before? Or why, just like a slightly annoyed presence. which is probably a little bit closer to real life. So it's not a catastrophe if you didn't do it right the first time, but it does kind of give you a little bit of incentive to get it right the first time. So anyway, number 3 was defining the actions. So that, yeah, and that is kind of tied in with this fourth key for good experience design is, let's always strive to make it relevant. And this is especially a big part of microlearning design. It needs to connect with that learner. It really needs to connect with where they're at and what their, what their need is. So here's another example. We recently partnered with Thomson Reuters to create this set of modules on the foundations of legal research. And the target audience here was law students, and particularly students about to enter law school. Okay, so we really kind of spent time thinking about that persona, and these 2, 3, 4-minute courses were made available as a resource to help them as they're entering law school. Kind of just a quick background, high-level understanding of some key legal ideas for related to legal research. So you'd see in some of these modules, it's like origins of the law, how a bill becomes a law, just some real basic 101 explainer video type content. And so remember I mentioned that sometimes info-based microlearning is the best fit. So this is an example that's, for the most part, a fairly straightforward info-based experience. It's a lot like an explainer video. We used a combination of tools. We had After Effects for things like this that were conceptual. I guess explainer video is probably a good word for it. More conceptual, how things relate with each other. We use Vyond for some of the characters, just to give a little personification of some of the roles. And then we drop those videos into Storyline just so that we would have a few clickable experiences within it. But it really plays like a video, and it kind of sounds like an explainer video, but with a little bit of interactivity. And so let me jump ahead to this, where we didn't want to stay at that level though, right? We didn't want to stay at just something that felt like it floated above and defined a bunch of key terms about legal research. With this learner, trying to make it relevant is really about, what does this look like in that student's life? Like when they get an internship or they get their first assignment, what are they going to have to do? And what questions are good questions to ask right off the bat? And so we had some of those elements in here where, the learner is presented with this first person view of, okay, you're asked to help as a research assistant, and here's the assignment. We're representing the Hackett's in this is the legal case, and we want you to particularly go search for precedent on this particular search term. So it's kind of a, it's a little scenario, little case study of, here's how you would prepare to go research. You don't just jump right into their Thomson Reuters Westlaw software and just start searching away. You have a plan, you have a main research question objective, and a key search term you're going after, and really try to solidify that concept for them. And really, the course stayed out of the software. We didn't do a how-to for, within the software. It was really about just helping them visualize like the process of legal research. Okay, last one. So 5 keys. Number 5, create a sandbox. If we're designing an interaction with relevant, consequential content, there needs to be a sense of safety and comfort, that there's not a fear of getting it wrong or a fear of, am I going to click the wrong thing? So we want the choices to be natural and to imitate a real experience. So, instead of a multiple choice A, B, C, D, rather we try to search for an opportunity to create what we call a sandbox experience. So that means having the freedom to decide, if you're in a sandbox, which toy you want to pick up next. We want to give you that freedom if the content really lends itself to that. So in what you're seeing here, this is an experience where we were helping a medical organization teach about concussion protocol and specific aspects of that, and decision making. So audience being non-medical professionals, coaches, parents, volunteers on a sideline of a sports event, and how to run a concussion protocol that they had set up for non-medical professionals. So really the key decision in this interaction was right here. Do you return the athlete to play or not? So everything starts, the very beginning is, boom, athlete is down, it gets up, stumbles to the sideline and says he's okay. What do you do next? You saw it was a pretty bad hit, so what do you do now? And then it provides you with this series of options on the left. You can, and these are optional, you could skip them and return them right back to play. You can just skip them and remove them from play immediately, or you can go through these questions. And so there's observable behavior, there is situational awareness questions, where you can really try to gauge, is this person ready to go back or not? And so here's kind of where the sandbox happens too. There's not a specific right or wrong question to ask here. And there's options of how you what sequence you want to ask these questions. And some of these answers he gets right. And so, you really have to look carefully to figure out, is he safe to go back or not? And so it's not immediately obvious what's right or what's wrong in this situation. And so, I mean, even some of his answers are a little snarky, like, why are you asking me this? Of course, I know the color of my own eyes, things like that. And so, and again, consequential interactions where, exploring this space, making decisions, and then depending on if you've assessed this correctly, we have a consequence of what happens with the decisions that you made. So I've got, there's about 4 minutes left, and I am out of time here. If you are, well, I'll come back. Let me summarize. 5 keys: know your learner, define the objective, define the action, make it relevant, and create a sandbox. So first of all, thank you for joining this digital exposition. Hopefully it was fun from my basement to yours. And yeah, I appreciate you guys, and greetings from Minnesota. If you are interested in seeing more examples, I've got several more, or if you want to see any of these in more detail and you think, oh, that might really connect with some things we're doing, reach out to me here at my email address, or connect with us at Dashe.com. So with that, if there's any questions in the chat, I can try to jump in there for a few minutes, and otherwise, appreciate you and have a good week.